be acceptable to God. Amen. In ancient Israel, widows were the poorest of the poor. Losing the support of a husband meant to fall below what we today would call the poverty line. Now, some widows were able to remarry with a member of the family of the deceased husband, but that did not happen very often. Jesus asked his disciple to notice a widow who throws 2 small coins, not worth a nickel, in the treasury of the temple. And why does he do that? It cannot be to give us a moral example of a good behavior. If Jesus did so, he would have colluded with those religious people who, in his words, devour the house of the widows in one translation, or in our translation here, they live off the property of poor widows. He warns his disciples to stay away from those people and their behavior and their religion. I don't know if you noticed that in the Gospels, Jesus never wants his disciples to stay away from any kind of questionable people except from very religious people. These religious people are very concerned about the externals of religion. For example, about the beauty of the temple and the vestments, but they collaborate with the systemic oppression of the poor. Today, we would say that their companies and their investments produce poverty, so that people end up living in the streets. They live off the lives of poor widows. It does not get clearer than that in any other place in the Gospel. So, putting together on the same page the story of these rich people, religious people, and the poor widow cannot be interpreted as a moral example. On the contrary, it is meant to show how horrible these people are, to the point that they have created a religion which asks the poor people to give away what they have for the glory of God, which is in fact their own glory, their own greed. Jesus calls his disciples to pay attention to the widow because they did not notice her. And only when they notice her, they might understand. And I feel there is a huge sadness in Jesus' words. She gave all that she has to live on. That was a grocery line. The reading that I'm offering now is in line with the prophets of Israel, of which Jesus in a way was one. And so we can call this reading prophetic. We can, however, also flip the coin. We can see the widow not just as a victim of the system, but as a free agent of her own destiny, somebody who makes a choice. Within the context of her poverty, the widow is not able to change much at this point. So we may know, from our point of view, that the money that she gives will end up to feed the greed of these religious people. But still, she's doing something that for her, subjectively, is a free act and has a great relevance. She might be on the brink of destitution, but she's not afraid. She gives away the little that she has, which could not preserve her anyway from falling down below the line of poverty. And in doing so, she performs an act that we call an extreme act of devotion. In stark contrast with the rich religious people who give a lot to the temple, but in fact they give only a small portion of their income, maybe up to 10%, she gives away all that she has. She has total faith in God, who promised abundance of life, even in a situation that seems to confirm nothing of that promise. And here, of course, we can see very well the parallel with the reading in the First Testament of Elijah and the widow. Religious people talk a lot about the promises of God in their prayers, but they do not trust God. They prefer to remain attached to their money, to their security. The giving up, the letting go, the act of pure trust performed by the widow is difficult to understand. It touches certain mystical depths that are lost on the disciples of Jesus. If we have only a prophetic reading of the scriptures, we might not understand this at all. It is a giving up, a letting go in a desperate situation, which is the opposite of an act of desperation. From the point of view of the widow, it's an extreme moment of openness to the God of life and abundance. I think it's not a chance that this story happens right before Jesus goes to his passion. Jesus will let go of life, the sacrifice of which we have heard in the second reading, not because he does not love life, but as an act of supreme trust in life itself and in life's divine origin, whom we call Father. This Sunday, as every Sunday, we celebrate as a feast such act of surrender, and we proclaim that from this act it came joy and renewed life. So in no way, I think, the story of the widow in the temple is an exhortation to give more to the temple. Such moralization is unacceptable, although it has been used for many centuries for people, religious people in churches, to get more money. It is instead both a critique of the temple and at the same time an example of mystical wisdom. I dare to say that both readings are valid and that maybe Jesus meant both of them. In any case, our life as Christians moves always back and forth between those two interpretations, between the prophetic and the mystical. The prophetic element is indispensable. Without that, without the fight for justice, we only have a religion of pure sentimentalism. We need to stand against religious hypocrisy, which is just a way of covering up injustice. But the mystical element is also indispensable. Otherwise, we have a religion deprived of personal depth and totally identical with the social movement. And these two things, the fight for social justice and the mystical act of surrender, are hard in themselves. They are hard to understand, and they are even harder to practice. Yet we are called to both, never just to one of them. May we be granted wisdom to recognize that both are already part of our life, and that we do not need to choose one or the other. But we are called to strive for an integral life which can hold both together with the help of God. Amen.